Okay, we'll go ahead and call the Streets and Sidewalks Committee meeting to order. We have one thing on the agenda tonight. Is Patrick down here? He's not yet. There's only one thing on the agenda. It is 18019, 1-22, Mid-Street Crosswalk Safety and Historic District. And either Bill or Mark can explain the request for council action, and we'll go from there. Patrick's got some information.
Either one I can, yeah.
All right, well, I'll just chime in real quick.
We had talked about, and I think everybody, everybody that's been uptown has looked at different things that we have with regard to the crosswalks, and probably have heard the same thing I've heard from folks, particularly on right turns from right lanes. I've heard numerous times people say, I'm in the crosswalk and somebody makes a right turn and doesn't see me. And so I started to look at the crosswalks because we've spent, I don't know how much money we spend on promoting the downtown. We get huge crowds of people. But when you look at our crosswalks, one thing that concerned me out of two or three things that I'm going to mention is that if you are walking mid-block, for example, if you're on the center block where Ziegler's used to be, where the cars pull in parking, or if you're walking out from the square side on the west side, you are in the crosswalk, but you're not seen because there's cars, there are parked cars there. And depending on two things, I guess, daylight or night, and how well somebody's paying attention, you can pretty quickly walk out from behind it. What you're walking out from is behind the car, and not be seen. The second concern I had that Mark and I talked about was the lighting at the intersections, where we do have, where the crosswalks are intersection crosswalks, and most of them, there's an arm over it, but the crosswalks in the evening and the night are very dark, and people really, it's hard to see people when they step out into those crosswalks. So, I had looked at a number of different things, and then some of them, met with the mayor, met with the city engineer, met with the service director, and we talked about it since I turned it in, to try to find a way to accommodate the safety needs of people, whether you're walking out at night, you're walking out in a crowd, or you're just individually walking out, to accommodate that, ensure it's as safe as it could be. And secondly, to do it in a way that's practical and reasonable for where we live. I sent some pictures that I had seen crosswalks where there was lighting in the ground. And in truth, I looked at that and I thought, well, that would be pretty good. But apparently, if you look at where we live, the climate that we live in, the snow plowing that we do, and then the expense of putting that in, that was a pretty serious expense. So what I finally came up with, which I thought was a good idea, would be to do these things. One is let's take the west side block where people parallel park, the west square block. The car parking is right up to the crosswalk. And we know that we want to have all the parking that we can, but if you took out one parking space and just reoriented the parking spaces so that you opened up enough space so that if you're driving up, you would be more likely to see someone. And secondly, if you had a light or some signal that you could press when you want to cross a mid-block crosswalk, so that the people driving up aren't going to get distracted by the light, but it will be obvious that that's a crosswalk. And part of this, I think, is because we, unlike some cities in some states, we are not, it's not in our DNA, this center block cross. You go some places and people just stop. They know to stop at a crosswalk, and that's generally not how things, are here. But we have the center block crosswalks in order to facilitate people moving back and forth from the square, and they're particularly helpful during large events when there's a lot of people here, because if we didn't have those crosswalks, people would be walking anywhere. I think most of us have seen people on Town Hill. If Town Hill, you are at the lower part of Town Hill near Castle Noel or something, people don't want to walk all the way up to the corner, and so you can see people every single day just kind of crossing the street. So you can imagine if we have a crowd here of 5,000, 6,000 people, and we had no center block crosswalks, it would probably be more dangerous. So the two things, the things that I did look at, and I think would be a good thing to see if we could cost them out and if they could be implemented, were, one was the lighting of the crosswalks that are at the corners. And there's electricity in the arms that hang over those. So it seemed to me that we could install a light in those arms that would come on be on at night, would be on in the dark, not just when you press the button, but a light that would be on because the arm hangs over the crosswalk. That would illuminate the crosswalk so cars could see that the crosswalk is there. Secondly, to make sure we adjust the parking so that there's a visibility of the people that are walking out from, whether they're walking out from pull-in parking or they're walking out from parallel parking. And thirdly, to have some sort of a signal to indicate that that is a crosswalk. Then I had this idea, and that's what I was going to use the marker for. I sent you guys a picture. I had this idea for these things that I'm not really sure what they're called, but I call them tons. And so it was like this. This is the sidewalk, and this is the street. So here's a parallel parking, and here's parallel parking, and we'll put the crosswalk here, and here's parallel parking. What was to put a ton, the distance of the same length as a park with the car, to put a ton here and a ramp down, so that when people step out, there's an indication that there's a visibility before they step out that there is somebody walking into the road. And it also would be the same thing if you had pull-in.
She brushed some other marks.
It would be the same if you had pull-in cars like this. It'd be to leave that space and have the ton and have the handicap thing there on the curb, so people you can see someone. And then my thought was then have the light, be out here. And I thought that would probably provide the safety. And then on top of everything else, a lot of crosswalks that I looked at were wider, but they were also more heavily marked, so that you have a wide enough crosswalk and you have markings because of the, where we live, the climate we live in. I guess they wear off. And if you look at the crosswalks today, we have a great, nice sunny day, but most of the crosswalks you can't see. And the last thing I want to mention, then Mark, you can go ahead, is, and this I guess is for you, Patrick, because I'm not sure how you deal with this, but if you are coming south on Court Street and you come to the corner where Cool Beans is, you have a green light, so you are coming up the street and you're just going to turn right. When you turn right, the crosswalk lights on Liberty are for walking. The white guy walking is there, so the crosswalk is to walk, but I don't think you can actually see when you're coming south on Court, when you make that turn. And that's one of the most frequent places that people say, I almost got run over in the crosswalk. And if you stop, I guess you could see that you could get through that. But if you stop and you have a lot of people in town when we have an event, the turning right traffic at that intersection can't go when there's a lot of people in the crosswalk. And frequently, no car gets through because they just can't go anywhere because of the crosswalk. If you look at the timing of the little white man and the crossing and the number of cars that can get through, or if there is no one seen in the crosswalk because you really can't see it because of the way the building sits, it's really hard to see that corner. But that's kind of aside from the other issues, but I think if we looked at three things, one is to light the crosswalks where you walk mid-block. One is if we had a permanent light that hung over the arm so that you could see that there are crosswalks there at night. And thirdly, was the idea that I had for those tunnels.
Mark?
Thank you, Jenny. I think Bill's pretty much hit everything, but what we were looking at is trying to put something in place that's effective, but also reasonably priced, so we can, hit the safety mark of the uptown area. I mean, we invest so much money in the uptown. I've seen close calls up there. You've heard me preach here for a while about trying to do something uptown. And I think what we've come up with the pad for the mid-blocks, now the light itself, I think, we need to look at engineering or professionals to give us suggestions that one is not going to get interfered possibly by getting hit in some way, so maybe it needs to sit back further than what Bill's proposed. We'll hopefully look at some options. But the arms that go over the corners, there's 3 arms per intersection, so we'll have to look at where we can light up the one intersection that doesn't have an arm over it. Bill brings up that corner in front of Cool Beans. Somebody has been hit there. I think it's probably been 4 or 5 years, but somebody has been hit there by actually one of our customers, my employer, one of their customers, because we talked about it. I know that for a fact. But I think with what we're proposing, once we fine tune it, the additional marking of the crosswalks, I think and some kind of alert system to let the drivers know that there is pedestrian crossing, or some kind of alert system for the pedestrian and the driver, so they know, one, it's safe, and two, it gets dark there. So we're just trying to make the uptown area a lot safer. And the original proposal that Bill had with the lights going across embedded in the ground, I don't think, well, just like Bill said, will work. Costs is another issue. So I think we can find something that is going to be cost effective and still address the safety concerns up there. And as much as we invest in our uptown area, I think we need to address this sooner than later before something tragic happens.
I like the tongue idea. It does add the definition to it, but Nino, how would that impact snow plowing?
We talked about that with, Pat and I met with the supervisors. I mean, it's a challenge. I mean, sweeping and street snow and ice detail would be a challenge, but something you have to look at.
And one other thing that I've been noticing as I'm driving, especially at night, is I'm heading north on Court Street there near the crosswalk, the center crosswalk, and the traffic's coming at me southbound. And if it's one of these new cars or trucks with these new headlights, I don't see anything in that crosswalk, because those headlights are blinding me, because they're coming right at me. My thought is, for everybody's safety, let's just eliminate that crosswalk completely. That particular one, leave the center crosswalks on the other 3 corners, but because of the topography, let's eliminate that possibility of somebody getting hit, because I know if it's impacting me, it's got to be impacting other people in the same way. It just blinds everything. A thought to add to the safety.
Well, setting up the meeting, I approached Patrick and asked him to look at several different areas that we could increase the safety of the pedestrians trying to cross, whether it be on the corners or on the mid-block, and try to do it in the most economical fashion that could be possible. A lot of people use that crosswalk that you're talking about. I would hope that we can find something. I know I mentioned to Patrick, my wife and I were in Florida a couple months ago, in the town that we were in. Their mid-block crosswalks all have the lights, and I don't know if it was actually a button that somebody had to push, or if it was a sensor that when people were in that crosswalk, that a flashing, it was the LED lights, yellow lights on a bar going across that let motorists know that there were people. It was on both sides of the street. And then there was a painted area for the crosswalk at the mid-block. And we were down there for 3 weeks and used that stretch of highway quite a bit. And even being new, not seeing that pattern before, I knew that something was going on. I didn't know if it was, maybe, like a lot of areas have the lights on the traffic signals when a fire truck or an ambulance or a police cruiser is going through with their siren. I knew that it meant something the first time I saw it that I had to take caution on. So, I stopped it. As soon as I got up to it, I realized it was a crosswalk. And I think these are a lot of good ideas that we're presenting the mayor and the engineer with. And like I said, my goal would be to increase the safety, but do it economically as conservative as possible.
Can I add this? Let me add, when we talked about this, Nino and I talked, and the engineer and the mayor, we talked as well. What I said, when we had our we had our discussion, and when Mark and I talked about it, we are not experts in this. We see the issue, and understanding that Nino and Patrick have more expertise. And there are probably other options than the ones that we put forward. I talked to you one day, I said, I was at the Cedar Lee Theater, and it was night, and went to a restaurant, and I there was a mid-street crosswalk, and I pressed a button, and I wasn't really sure where the lights even came from, but these lights definitely came on. So I'm sure a lot of cities that are, in this area, the region, we looked at that, the region where we live, do a lot of different things. And so it always seemed reasonable to me that we could have this discussion, from our base of knowledge, and we're pretty much talking about the things that we see and the goal we want to achieve. And then if it was good, if the mayor's okay with it, we could ask the administration just to take a look at these things and come back and say, this looks like something that would be
Feasible.
Yeah, it would be feasible, it would meet the goal, it would keep the cost, would be responsible. And the one thing, of course, we haven't talked about, and it's always that, it's hard to say, I suppose you want to balance it, but we have this historic district. And so, in a sense, we want to have the safety things implemented, but we also don't want to do something that's so overt that it maybe isn't necessary, and it would detract from, the ambience of the district. But that said, it would rise to the level of, it actually makes a difference in safety.
Right.
Like Paul said, when you come up that, when you do drive up there north, that is a problem with those lights. But I still think that center block, I think if we take any of the center block crosswalks out, people will just randomly be crossing the street, and then it could be worse.
Well, and I think we also have to mention along with this, and that people have to take personal responsibility too. I have seen a lot of people, just because it's a crosswalk, they may be talking amongst each other and just proceed out into the crosswalk without looking, foolish on their part, because they're depending on everybody seeing them, so.
Unless you're a kid. The thing is if you're a kid, kids run out. That's
Right.
what I think about when I see the cars parallel or pull in. If you're a kid and your parent is maybe here, kids run ahead.
All right.
That's a bad place to run out.
Right, you're right.
But you're right, we can't, we can't fix everything.
Right. Mayor?
Let me start, please. So Bill and I talked that these islands are going to be problematic for us for the reasons that Paul mentioned. I guess I'd rather start with some things that are a little bit easier to accomplish. So we've taken the intersection of Liberty and Court Street and the intersection of Broadway and Washington, and have already increased the lights and the decorative lighting around there to see what impact that has. We feel that will have some impact, maybe not as much as a light shining straight down. We have to be careful of the one shining straight down, not blinding the drivers. And we'd also have to see if ODOT will even allow it. One of the crosswalk signs was an actual flashing strobe that a group was marketing. You'll get the driver's attention.
Right.
You will, but then they're looking at the light and not looking in front of them and hit the car or hit the person in the crosswalk.
Right.
Because it's mesmerizing. A
Right.
strobe light, just like they are in police cars and things, and we're always cautious of that. So now ODOT will approve the LEDs like they have at the traffic signals and the others, where it's those smaller lights all along the border that just flash. We applied well, let me go back. First, we were looking for other funding mechanisms, and knowing that that's a walking route to Garfield for a good portion of the children in the northwest corner here, we tried to see if we could use some safe walking routes to school. For a community to be eligible for that, you have to have 65% of the students walk to school. Our district has 15%. Therefore, even if that particular school had a higher percentage, if we don't meet the criteria throughout the community or district, then that doesn't work. So that would not work. We did, however, apply. We weren't going to, but we were solicited to apply for the state capital grant. And they gave us $250,000. It's still working its way through all the approvals, so it's not in stone yet. But that money was approved for improvements to the historic district. Could be in the restrooms at the fire station, could be the crosswalks, could be a variety of things. The only problem with that is the approvals will likely not take effect, and us be able to start the plans to spend those funds until summer is almost over, because it's in the next budget cycle. But at least it's something that we would know. Knowing that, we wouldn't want to go ahead and invest $100,000 if 2 months later we could get the $100,000. That's the only reason I'm sharing that with you. And the last thing I guess I would like to share with you is, if a person driving the car is so preoccupied with talking to the people in the car, or talking on their phone, or whatever else is going on, they aren't going to pay attention to the crosswalk. I mean, I've been up there at noon when you can see people for 3 miles, and somebody's going to start turning until, they're startled that when they look up, I'm right there in front of them. And that's driver inattention, and none of these safety things is going to fix that. And then just one clarification for Bill. The lights, when the crosswalk signal comes on, it does not stay on for the period that the light is green. It comes on for a while, it's white, which means it's good to cross. When it starts blinking, that's to clear those that are in the crosswalk to get out of the crosswalk, but you're not supposed to enter it at that point.
Right.
And then that light stays green so that people can then make their right-hand turns and the traffic doesn't back up. So each of the lights are timed in different sequence, but they are not the entire time that the traffic is green.
Thank you. Patrick? Oh, sorry, Laura.
That's okay.
You'll go after Patrick.
After talking to Denny and Bill, I was asked to put together kind of an estimate based on, I think, the Cleveland Heights idea. Now, that was that flashing, pedestrian sign. It's solar powered. There's a push button, so when you walk up here, you push it and the light, comes on. It does not include the tongue, so at least my cost here. I did reach out and talk to a contractor, and we got to do all 4 sides of the square, which would be 8 of those lights, including the pavement marking and some additional signage we would need. Budget number would be $60,000 to $70,000 for that. So if you're going to add, if we want to add those tongues, that would be a little more. This pavement marking is pretty basic. It's more than what we have now, but it's not anything extravagant. If we want to do additional pavement marking, or somebody even asked about doing within the crosswalk, doing like a color, like a brick red type thing that sticks out. Those are all possibilities that's just going to add to that cost.
So the light that you're talking about, the light we talked about, that's not the light that you were talking about, was it, Mayor?
Yeah, I think so.
Is that, that's light
With the
that you think will
LED
distract?
No, that's different.
The first one I talked about, it was a flashing beacon.
Right.
That was prohibited by ODOT because
Okay.
of the distraction to drivers. But these other ones, ODOT has approved for this purpose, as well as you'll see them at the traffic circles, or you'll see them sometimes even on stop signs, where it's like a high accident area. The perimeter of the stop sign will be flashing with those LEDs. So,
You got around the-
and because they're not so bright, but they get your attention,
Yeah.
that's why ODOT allows them.
So is that the light I saw Is that the Cleveland Heights light?
That is
Cleveland Heights, okay. Is that me in the crosswalk?
Yeah, it's right underneath that truck.
It's right up your rear of your vehicle, yeah.
That's a pretty good estimate. I mean, that's a good estimate, though. I mean, that's-
Yeah, no, I mean, I thank you for doing the legwork there, Patrick. I think anything like, you know, I applaud Mark and Bill for bringing this forward. We've all recognized that there is a problem, and, you know, we initially had the signs
Yes.
that didn't work as well as we anticipated. But anything that's going to improve it is again, improving the safety. So, I mean, I think that budget that you're talking about for the striping and the lighting itself on the signs, I mean, I would think that would be doable, especially if, you know, later this summer we do receive that grant. But Laura, I want to go ahead and let you comment.
Thank you. While we're discussing, you know, safety on the square with the crosswalks, there's two other areas I feel that need to be at least discussed. One somewhere in the vicinity of Sully's, because there's a lot of people who just run out of Sully's and across to the parking lot, and a lot of people come out between parked cars, and I think that that's an issue with safety. And the same thing down near Castle Noel. Now that that's become so popular, people are not walking to the southern end to cross
Right.
there, they're crossing directly across. The only good thing about both of those spaces that you have there is we wouldn't have to eliminate a parking space or anything along those lines, because I think if we were to do it properly, I believe it could go driveway to driveway. And there's already a natural place to put something like that. The one in front of Sully's is going to become more important when we put the development in. And if we're going to have a parking area down there and some additional stores, you're just going to have more people that are going to try and cross
Right.
right there. So, while we're looking at the cost of these, it might not be a bad idea to
That's
factor
true.
those in for potential.
Another mid-block crosswalk.
And those are the two that I think are the most pressing. On the other side, I mean, I run across there all the time over to the professional building when I park in there, but, you've got the big trucks coming around the corner and all the rest, but I don't know that that one's quite as pressing as the other two, so.
I would not encourage any further mid-block crosswalks, because we've had the request over and over, and the state is not real keen on these. In fact, they don't like the four that we have currently. And they've let us keep those, but in particular on the state routes. And we've told other areas that have wanted them, no. And so now to go back and add some others. But everything she says is exactly right. There's a lot of people at Castle Noel, there's a lot of people that cross along the side of Sully's over to the auto parts or to the backs of those stores there. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think we should be encouraging that with another mid-block crosswalk.
Well, and I think that goes back to the personal responsibility that people think. I mean, I agree with you. It sounded like a good solution. We're always been dealing with, ODOT since there's, state routes. And we have to respect, we don't have to agree, but we have to respect their opinions on that. So, I mean, I never thought about that, because I remember in the past, we talked out by, I think it was by St. Francis, they wanted, if I remember correctly, when they put in the new parking lot.
Yeah, Root Candle wanted one.
Right.
Miss Molly's.
Right.
Miss Molly's one.
Nino? And then we're,
Real quick, so piggyback on the mayor's comments about upping the wattage, the light bulbs on the corners. Most of our, as you know, historic street luminaires are 70-watt HP high-pressure sodium bulbs. So because of what Mr. Lamb described about the ambience was never up that wattage. Well, now the street guys have found bulbs that are actually 300-watt LEDs, and they did put two in, then thought that they were going to be too bright, so they took them out without even giving us a chance to really look at them. So what's in there is, I think, 200 or 150-watt bulbs. So we're ordering the 300-watt LED, which will really brighten up. One was located at the prosecutor's office right in front, where it really wouldn't impact, an apartment or someone who's dining. So that remained until they pulled it out. So we plan on putting 300-watt LEDs in those corners as an experiment, just to see how to brighten up the area, and that should help. And I'm not sure with the street luminaires that, within the 49 that we own, if we could up the wattage in those around the square, talk to Jansen, that might help illuminate as well.
Sure.
As an
Well, that's good to know, though.
Yeah.
Well,
Mr. Hubert, is there anything that you want to add, you know, and it's fine if you don't, but,
Pat wants to experiment with increased wattage on the bulbs, it's by all means.
yes, go ahead.
Just real quick to point out, we do have some other areas in town of mid-block crossings. West Liberty, I think, down by A.R. Route, East Reagan by Ashwood, and West Sturbridge by A.R. Route School. Probably not as much pedestrian traffic there, but at least two of those, Reagan and West Sturbridge, involve school crosswalks. So maybe if we're thinking about doing this with the head crossing, we should think about that as
And
well.
another one that I feel would be important would be at the court in Northland, too. There's so many handicapped people that cross there to go to Bueller's or to some of the restaurants.
Yeah.
It's something we can look into, and like I said, Mark and Bill, I think, you know, really appreciate you bringing this to our attention.
And the grant, I mean, and the grant
Yeah.
is, that's always good.
Okay, we're pressed into the finance meeting, so we'll, if there's nothing further on the crosswalks, we'll move into finance.
Thanks.